There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, lovely people. My name is Sean the Bookmaniac, and this is not a Friday Reads, this is a Saturday Reads. And I didn't have anything finished by this time yesterday, but I do now. I have finished a couple. So here I am. Not going to chat about anything personal, other than to say I'm feeling a bit more hopeful, but it's going to be an emotional roller coaster for a while. Not ready to say any more, but thank you so much for all the well wishes and expressions of support. Let's get on to the books. So, I have a bail to tell you about. In fact, I think it was later the same day that I did my Friday Reads that I bailed on the Singapore book. What was that? Inheritance by Balli Jaswal. I thought the writing was fine, the story was interesting, but one of my pet peeves about fiction that doesn't work for me is when the characters do not have, whether it's sublimated or very dramatically expressed, but where the traumatic or dramatic events in a novel seem to have no effect on the characters, and that's what did me in with this. There was a lot of big themes in this novel. The son was kicked out of the Singaporean army for homosexual behavior, and he gets shipped off by his father to the States to study, but didn't get any interior sense that was convincing in the slightest about what was going on for the son or the father, and all the other things. There was a sister that gets horrifically sexually assaulted, and I just didn't feel like any of these really big, heartrending events had any kind of an emotional believability. So I bailed. So that's the second of hers that I've bailed on. I think I bailed on, after the first chapter, on the erotic lives of Punjabi something. What was that one? So I think I'm done with her. Erotic stories for Punjabi widows. I bailed on very, very early. And no, I shall not be replacing it with anything new. Singapore, I've done my best with Singapore. On to greener pastures. That was my one bail. And I have finished 2. I almost forgot. So this is having a little supplement that's going to go in at the beginning. I finished 3 since my last Friday Reads. Last Saturday I finished a book that I'd completely forgotten. I thought I had wrapped it up in my last Friday Reads, but nope. So, in fact, I did finish the Algerian novel for Invisible Cities, Children of the New World by Assia Djebar, translated from the Arabic by Marjolijn de Jager. And I gave this 4 stars. I wanted to give it 5, but no, sorry. I gave this 3 stars, yet I liked it more than a 3-star read. I may go back and change it, but no, I don't think so, because I thought it was a really bad translation. Or, let's put it this way, an uneven translation. So, do I blame the writer or the translator? I'm going to say that it must be the translation, because, boy, this was a fascinating novel and incredibly well-structured and well-told. Set in about 1960, Algerian Revolution, and the lives of the women, wives of Arabic police officers in service to the colonial state, wives of militants and rebels, and daughters and cousins. So the story of that very chaotic, violent, dangerous time, told through the lives of women who are situating themselves and actualizing themselves, in some cases, to participate in this very important and well-justified revolution against the French bastards. I just thought it was really well told, but not very well written. So I see that Assia Djebar, some of her other books have a different translator, so I will try them. But boy, there was some headache-inducing, clunky writing. But there was also some that I put up as book quotes on Instagram and Twitter and Litzy. Not consistently bad, but overall, really detracted. I couldn't give it even 4 stars. I had to give it 3 just to punish the really awful writing in so many places, because it just kept me from sinking into the story. So that was disappointing. I think I would like to read more by Assia Djebar, by other translators, and see how that goes. But I'm just glad I read it. I'm glad I didn't bail For me, 50% disappointing, 50% rewarding. That's a 3-star book, and that's what I gave it. Both really successful, really great reads. And these I both finished like about an hour ago. The Ruth Adam memoir, A House in the Country, published, 1957? And this was a recommendation by my dear friends and subscriber, Georgia, who also did a bite-sized book chat about it. And I think I liked it a little bit less than she did, but I really, really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. And as I have said before, it's about, in the immediate post-war period, a bunch of Londoners, friends, co-workers, and friends of friends that had been living together in really cramped conditions during the Blitz decide that they want to get out to the countryside and live more spaciously and more countrifiedly. And it's a really interesting story. The manor house that they end up renting, is the main character of the story, and it is a piece of work. It's in Kent, and I really like the local flavor and the portrait of the one remaining servant, the gardener from the previous manor family, was the caretaker, and he stayed on, and he was an elderly, colorful character. They tried to get other staff because it's such a big rambling house, and they just couldn't. And just the layout of this huge mansion, there was no possible way that they could look after themselves. And so that ended up becoming the perfect kind of metaphor as the UK was going through that massive transition post-war into the welfare state, and where people stopped having servants, or at least people of this class, middle class people. This kind of chronicles that transition period in a way that's really memorable and really, in fact, quite delightful. The writing is really good, and it's just anecdote after anecdote. That is the thing that I like the best, but it also is, if I flip it for a minute, the thing that I didn't love, which was that this was a true story. Ruth Adam is a novelist, and the people that she's writing about include her husband, who is never named, kids who never got really a sense of the kids at all, and various friends and co-workers. And I guess probably because of confidentiality or privacy, she didn't really bring any of the people that she was living in the house with to life, other than as they surfaced in anecdotes here and there. But the stakes ended up being too low for me because I didn't really end up caring about the people. I liked the sensibility of the narrator, Ruth Adam, and I believe this is strictly autobiographical and perhaps with a little bit of light fictionalizing. She's a novelist, and I think if she'd written an actual novel, I don't know if she's a good novelist. I have one of her books, Complaining on my, in fact, I have the ebook. So I want to read her novels because she's a very good writer. But I felt that the things that make me love literary fiction that were missing here was that the people that she was sharing the house with, including her husband and kids, but also there's like 4 other people, other than the odd anecdote, didn't ever really come alive for me. Not so much as some of the servants that she had some kinds of hilarious or dramatic relationships with. I'm Not Complaining is the one I have, from 1938. So it was a 4-star read, so I did really like it, but that was why it wasn't a 5-star read. It was one of those, not rare, but it's hit and miss Dean Street Press's Furrowed Middlebrow. I end up bailing on about half of them. This one was a real success, and thanks to Georgia for recommending it. And even more successful, I just finished You Are Eating an Orange, period. You Are Naked, period, by Sheung-King, published in end of 2020. I love this so much. It's one of the strangest works of satisfying literary fiction that I think I've ever read, and I did really struggle in a chapter or 2 near the middle, thinking, is this really working for me? But I just had to kind of take a deep breath and slow down. So, I mean, it's barely a 200-page novel, and I read it over a month. And yes, it really did work for me. I expect it would be a Marmite book for any of my booktube besties, but it's about a young translator living in Toronto and his Japanese girlfriend. He's originally born and raised in Hong Kong. It is not a plot-driven novel because barely anything happens. They occasionally travel together. They spend a lot of time sitting in cafes and going for walks, but not much else happens. But what does happen, and what makes it so incredibly rich, is that they tell stories to each other, especially he to her. And there isn't a lot of emotional content. She keeps leaving him for a day, inexplicably for a day or something, and she's very enigmatic, mysterious, and he is young. I think they're both very early 20s, and these stories that he shares from various Asian folklore traditions, most of them, but not all of them, and they talk a lot about movies and books, and sometimes he's talking to her about the books, sometimes he's talking directly to you, the reader, about the book. And so there's so many levels of storytelling, and that provides the emotional layer of this book. The fate of this couple is pretty much obvious by the end, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I was so emotionally invested in it because of the way those stories ricocheted off the conversations they were having and bounced off each other in a way that could have been, and I would assume this wouldn't work for every reader out there, but for me, it worked beautifully to make me think about deep philosophical thoughts, which is not something that happens every day in the reading life of Sean the Book Maniac, in a way that was inexorably linked to this very mundane story about a couple who spent their time hopping over to Macau and going to Taiwan together, and aside from that, just going around to cafes and having lunch or dinner or whatever in restaurants in Toronto. But the conversations and the stories shared and the breaks in the stories also added tension. Oh, I don't think I can do a better job 1 hour after finishing it to explain the book. I don't think the book is explainable. It's a very strange, very compelling work of fiction. It's got a little whiff of Murakami, but I don't think it has any of the purported sexism of Murakami, and it doesn't have any mystical woo-woo, other than perhaps you might think that there is a mystical element to all these stories circulating in this short book. But other than that, no, I didn't have any of my hackles raised about magical realism or anything like that, and about translation and about language and about do I exist and what does it mean to be transparent, and what about the holes that racism causes in the characters' lives. Oh my God. Oh, it was just incredible. And all the stuff about food. Oh, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was playful. It was sexy. Not one half sentence of explicit sexuality, but it was very sexy, and it made me want to eat an orange naked. But luckily for you, I opted for the next best thing and decided to just wear my orange shirt. That was really quite something. So thank you, Lindy, for putting that on my radar. That is one that Lindy and I definitely and very, very deeply agree on. So those are what I've finished. So let me tell you about the two that I started. And I've only got room now if I'm going to keep my reading to 15, and I think it's a good idea. With everything going on in my life, I don't need to add any more. I told you last week that I was going to be starting the Fannie Lou Hamer biography called Until I Am Free, Fannie Lou Hamer's Enduring Message to America by Keisha and Blain. And I'm not counting this as a bail, but I read the introduction and realized that the focus of this book was not actually a straightforward biography, but more about her thought, her philosophy, the intellectual history of her life and work. And I knew from chatting with Raymond that in 2021, 2 books about her came out, and I checked the other one, and it was much more of a straightforward biography. So that's the one, in fact, that I started. So I didn't mark the Keisha Blain book as a bail. I just deleted it from my Goodreads. I just read the introduction, and it looks very interesting. It might be a book I would enjoy in the future after getting more about her life. So the one that I've started instead is Walk With Me, a biography of Fannie Lou Hamer by Kate Clifford Larson. She is a white biographer. I have read her biography of Rosemary Kennedy. Rosemary, the Hidden Kennedy daughter, which I quite liked. And I've just got a bare start on this, and it's all about so far I'm reading about all the background in Mississippi of Fannie Lou Hamer's sharecropper family, and already just immersed in the incredible story of the family from which she emerged, and then looking forward to getting more into her own life eventually, but yet starting out really good. This next one is the one I'm going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole with. I have started a novel by an obscure female British novelist. None of her books are in print, as far as I can tell, and I am reading this one on archive.org. And I think it is her later novel. Let's see, let's get her up here. Her name is Elizabeth Berridge, and apparently there's a famous actor by the same name who was born in 1962, an American actor, and I don't know anything about popular culture, so that doesn't confuse me, but it might confuse you. But Elizabeth Berridge, the novelist, died in 2009, and she was 90, the day before her 90th birthday. Two of her novels are the ones that are most well known, but she's really not that well known, and one of them is the one I'm reading, Touch and Go. And Touch and Go was her last novel, written 13 years after the penultimate novel. The other one that she's really known for is an earlier one from 1964, Across the Common. Both of those were on internetarchive.org, but I decided to start with Touch and Go, and it is interesting. I haven't decided how much I like it yet, but it's certainly holding my interest. It's set in Wales. I believe the protagonist is Welsh. I don't think Elizabeth Berridge, I think one of her grandparents or great-grandparents was Welsh, but she lived her whole life in England, as far as I know. And it is about a newly divorced, middle-aged woman artist who lives, I think, in London, or a big city outside of Wales, and the doctor in her hometown in Wales, a very small little village in Wales, the doctor of the town died and left her his house, and it was a big old rambling house, and she hadn't kept in touch with him since she left this little Welsh village decades previous. She was quite shocked to find out she'd inherited this big house with all its possessions and even the service of the maid. But here's the thing that's fascinating. She reconnects with her old childhood friend who still lives in the town. And this friend comes over, and I am going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole here, so bear with me, but I hope you'll find this kind of interesting. Debbie is the friend, and our protagonist is Emma. Debbie remembers the big painting on the wall in the doctor's waiting room, because of course his clinic was also in his big old house. And so she wonders about this painting, and this painting was a humongous painting that was on the wall called Lady with a Tattered Glove. So I googled that, and here's the image, and it is quite a striking image. I've never heard of it. William Nicholson, and he's named in that part of the novel. But here's the thing that has just grabbed me by the throat. I am just so fascinated by this. And if any of you, I don't think many of you will have read this novel, but if you know the answer to my question and it's a spoiler in the novel, don't you dare tell me, because it's maybe going to all be revealed. But when I bring up the picture, and I've put it back on the screen again, there's the picture. And I've checked, is there another version of it that's zoomed out so that you can see more of the picture? Because Debbie is struck by the fact that there's a man's back off to the side of the picture, and his shadow is over the woman sitting at the table with the tattered glove. But that's not in the Nicholson painting, woman with a tattered glove. So what the hell is going on? And in fact, the other difference would be that they keep calling it the woman with the tattered glove, and this apparently is called the girl with the tattered glove, but it is a really enigmatic expression on her face, almost kind of Mona Lisa level of enigmaticness, but there's no shadow across her, and that's the full picture as far as I can see online. So I guess Elizabeth Berridge is fictionalizing this somewhat famous picture. William Nicholson died in 1949. He was a British artist, and I really like his stuff. I didn't know anything about him, but if you Google him, all his portraits are incredible. But I guess she's fictionalizing it, and she's making a feminist point. That's all I'll say about that. You should read the book. But last night I couldn't let go of it. Like, why? What's going on? These are the kind of things that give me joy. And believe you me, in the last couple of weeks, anything that gives me joy, I'm just going to go with it. And I'm just going to follow it right down the rabbit hole. So that has been fascinating. I'm making very slow progress with the book. I started it early in the week. I'm about 20% through. It's a short little novel. And let's say a little bit more about Berridge. She died in 2009. And her obituary in The Guardian, I'll put a link because it's fascinating. The subtitle of her obituary is Underrated Novelist and a Perceptive Celebrator of Family Life. She was born in South London of English and Welsh ancestry. But this one little anecdote I have to share. Apparently her short stories are wonderful too, and some of them are on archive.org. There is an annual anthology in the UK, maybe you know it, I'd never heard of it, put up by the British Council called New Writing. And very near the end of her life, the editors of New Writing selected one of Elizabeth Berridge's short stories, which had been written decades and decades before, but maybe new. I don't know where they found it, don't know the background, but they chose it for its originality and excellence, and in the belief that its inclusion would encourage other young writers. And then they had a launch party for the New Writing Journal, and she showed up, this octogenarian, and they were quite delighted. I love that. I love that. I love late bloomers, and she wasn't a late bloomer, but it's somewhat reminiscent of Barbara Pym's, the end of Barbara Pym's life after she'd been in the literary wilderness and was rediscovered just 2 years before she died. Yeah, so I love that story. So I hope I like this novel and like more of her stuff. And certainly I am just fascinated by this thing that she's doing with this painting. So if you have any information about the painting, please tell me. But if you have any information about how the book ends that's going to spoil it for me, don't say a word to me, okay? Those are the two that I've started. So I was hoping to start Kololo Hill, but I didn't. So I'm going to be starting Kololo Hill today or tomorrow. And that's for my Uganda for Invisible Cities. And the other one that I will start is the African American short story collection by Danielle Evans, Before You Suffocate Your Own Fool Self. That's what I have. Oops, where do you look, Sean? Where do I look? Right there. That's what I have to tell you today. Thanks for watching.